Hello, and thank you for joining our live webcast. And we hope by the end of it, you learn how a secure private cloud can help you scale at up to 85% less cost than a public cloud. But you don't need me to tell you about that. We've got some great guest speakers on the line. To help us today are three leaders in this space. First up, we'll hear from Scott Sinclair, who's a senior analyst with ESG, that's Enterprise Strategy Group. Then he'll bring in John Tour, Chief Marketing Officer at Cloudian. And then we'll round out the discussion. We'll bring in Seagate's Rags Srinivasan, Director of Marketing. My name is Joshua Walty, Seagate's Global Partner Lead, and I'll be your host for today's session.
All right. So happy to be here. So as Joshua mentioned, my name is Scott Sinclair, Senior Analyst with Enterprise Strategy Group. Some of you in the audience may be familiar with us. We do a number of things as an IT analyst firm, much of which is our validation activity. But here I'm here to talk about a lot of our research and what we've been doing on the overall IT space. The topic that we're talking about today is about how storage needs to change, and I have a ton of data on that. And like Joshua said, the goal here is not to bore you with slideware, but I will have some slides in the background, some of our research that will serve as the backdrop for our conversation today. And really the first thing is talking about digital transformation. And as you see on the slide where 86% of IT decision makers agree, which is pretty much everyone, that if we do not embrace digital transformation, we'll be a less effective and less competitive organization. And however, we're only just beginning. About 17% of organizations only consider themselves mature in their digital transformation efforts. And while this term gets used a lot, what I really think about when I think about digital transformation, I think about it as data is no longer just necessary for business, it becomes where it can drive the business. And that, to me, is a central theme in how, when I have conversations, when we do our research, how companies view digital transformation.
Yeah, we certainly see the same thing, Scott. This is John Tour from Cloudian, and we certainly see that in our customer base, that data, people have talked about it being a strategic asset for a long time, but now we're seeing that really take shape and become actualized. So people are keeping more unstructured data, and it's more frequently accessed for analysis, and that's really the key, is that people are accessing this data regularly to try to learn from it and spot patterns. And that means also longer retention periods. And of course, what that adds up to is just a whole lot more capacity, more unstructured data, longer retention periods. And this really is driving this whole digital transformation question, is what do I do with all that data? There's so much to manage. Do I keep it on the cloud? Do I keep it on-prem? Do I use traditional storage technologies, or do I look at newer storage technologies? And really what this drives is a lot of questions, all of which are revolving around this question of how to solve the problem of complexity.
John, you're absolutely right. That one of the things that when I like to think about it, for decades we were just storing data, and now we actually need to use it. And with that in mind, the fun part is, whose job is it to make sure the business can actually transform and use all this data? And it's IT's job. And one of the big themes that we see is this dramatic increase in IT complexity. And this is not to say IT hasn't always been hard. It's always been a very difficult, challenging task and required very smart, capable people to do it. But what's interesting here is we're seeing 2/3 of organizations, of IT decision makers, saying IT was more complicated than it was just 2 years ago. So to me, it's not the fact that IT is complex, because that stayed the same. What we're seeing is the rate at which that complexity is increasing. 2 years is, it may seem like a long time frame to a lot of people, but it is not as long as it should be for this complexity to increase like this.
Yeah, it's exactly right. That's a meteoric rise. And I think what's really interesting about this is that you've generalized this to all of IT, but I'm wondering, what are your customers saying about how that kind of complexity applies to storage in particular? Would you think the number would be higher or lower for storage?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the next couple slides I hit on this a little bit, but to spoil that is I think it's higher in storage, because if we look at what's driving the complexity, and I'll answer your question as we talk through, is we see two major factors when we ask people what made their life more complex, what's making IT more complex. The first one is on this slide, is that there's this persistent, grueling pace of IT, and everything's growing. We have more endpoints, we have more data, and we have more applications. And that data, we talked about a little bit about unlocking data for the business. Increasing the data is a huge challenge for storage just because, data has weight, it's hard to move, it's incredibly valuable. If you think about things like endpoints, if you think about the risk associated with, different parts of the data center, there's so much risk and importance involved with storage that it just adds to that complexity.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what really, I think, drives the need for different types of solutions. This conversation about what do I do with all this? How do I manage it differently? If I just keep doing the same thing the same way, that becomes quickly unmanageable. So how do I adapt to do this? Especially, I think what's really interesting is it not only are we, the quantity and the retention periods changing, but also the type of workloads that people are dealing with. That's changing as well, right?
Exactly. And I think that sets me up as well, because when you think about what is making IT more complicated, it's scale. But things have been growing in IT for a while, but it's also things are new. So it's not just, okay, we have, I have my established, traditional, predictable activities, and now I just have more of it. Well, that's true. I have this flood of new technology to adopt, and we see this in new workloads that you have to understand, new possibly digital transformation initiatives that change the way we operate, as well as the integration of on and off premises. Before we just had a data center, and now we have to figure out how to integrate public cloud services. And going back to your comment about how is storage even more complicated, I would say it is, because storage is one of the areas where we've just seen a flood of new technology options. So not only is data very valuable, there's a ton of risk associated with it and cost, but also the fact that there's just a lot of new storage technologies out there that have transformative impacts on the data center that organizations need to understand.
Yeah, exactly. And this whole idea of computation happening at the storage level is a really exciting development. The whole need for AI, ML, and analytics on the storage is really transforming the way we think about that whole infrastructure. And the other piece of this is that with more data being generated, it all needs to be available instantly for that analysis. If you can't get at that data instantly, how do you perform any kind of useful work on it? Yeah, I think this is one area where the cloud has really changed our expectations of how we both access and use data. We've all become accustomed to having data immediately accessible all the time. It's just something we now take as a given. And I think that's where this whole cloud versus on-prem thing becomes interesting, is that in many cases, ironically enough, that expectation drives the need to have that storage be available on-prem in a private cloud. And I think that's kind of an interesting dichotomy there.
Absolutely. And one of the data points I didn't put in the deck, but you made me think of, is we did a study of line of business executives. So these are non-IT personnel, but IT's customers. And what we found was 1/4 of them considered IT as a business inhibitor, which was 4 times more likely than to say their IT is competitive differentiator. And the number one reason was we can't find the data we need. So the line of business, your business teams are seeing this inability to leverage, or when there's a challenge to delivering analytics, when there's a challenge to getting the insight from the data, what your line of business teams are seeing is the competition maybe not having those challenges. And that's where we're seeing drive competitive difference between businesses within specific industries. Driving, and which is fueling, when we think about, okay, what is driving all this data growth, you see when we ask which workloads within your on-premises data center are driving the most data growth, you see a ton tied to extracting more business value from data, IoT being the number one answer. big data, data lakes being up there. Yeah, you have some more traditional apps with ERP and virtualization environments, but AI and machine learning is just exploding right now, and then analytics as well. So a tremendous amount of application growth dedicated to these new emerging workloads that are all designed around extracting value from data.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Is that these are things that are, in some of these cases, these are brand new use cases, in some of these cases are established use cases, but they're all sharing a commonality, which is that customers are looking to increase their on-premises data growth. When you talk to people, when you talk to users, what are the factors they're citing for the need to have that data on-prem?
One of the when I think about it, and we get into this, so is companies that have, and the respondents in this study were organizations that had a data center. So these are companies established. We have a data center. We're also leveraging cloud environments predominantly as well. But when you think about data and the gravity of data or the weight of data, is high-value scenarios or high-value data sets, organizations tend to want to keep in-house. And we see that in a number of different workloads. One of the studies, so we've done a couple different studies on specific workload types, and I think this sets it up, is when we look at, for example, analytics and data lakes. So we looked at, okay, what types of data? You see a strong mix of both structured and unstructured, with unstructured being a little bit more of a weight there, which makes tremendous sense. But when you think about what is my objective for these data lakes, we have to have massive scale, we have to have very high-level security, and we have to have insane reliability. And when you think about those things, right now, the perception is, and in many parts the reality, is that on-premises infrastructure can more easily and cost-effectively deliver those aspects. That is not to say the public cloud is negligent or bad in any means, but right now, if you think about the current technology, if you have it established, there's a plan. Organizations can more effectively deliver those capabilities and more cost-effectively deliver them on premises. Yeah,
exactly. And I think this point about analytics and data lakes is really where that point gets amplified. Is you want to talk a little bit about what does this mean? The idea of analytics and data lakes and the growth you're seeing here.
Yeah. So essentially, what it's driving is that organizations are finding out. Part of it is a need driven. Businesses are seeing what competitors are able to do, what other groups in business are able to do, and by leveraging data and using it for either real-time analysis, predictive analysis, to drive business decisions. And so because of that, what's interesting is once they start doing it in one area, then it opens up, well, what other aspects of the business can we provide these tools to? In addition, so we're seeing this flood there, but in addition we see, okay, the more data generated, the more data used in these activities tends to provide better results. So what you have is this massive data growth on two axes. On one hand, we're trying to store a whole bunch more data because we realize better data gives us better insights. And we're also storing more data because we want to get insights in other areas. But additionally, we see more data need to be active because we see more data gives us better insights. So that's a huge chunk of what we're seeing within analytics environments. And then to transition, we see a similar activity in AI and machine learning, which is more emergent, obviously, than data lakes, but we're seeing a similar scenario where we ask organizations, what is your primary infrastructure deployment model for that? Very much on premises. We see, this is the chart in front of you shows a smorgasbord of different offerings to what people are doing. If you add it all up, all the on-premises options, you get to 64%. What's really interesting is in the same study, we went back and asked everyone in this study, are you happy with what you're doing or would you change? And 76% of the people in the study said we would change what we're doing now. And when we ask them, okay, what would you do? The percentage on-premises actually increases to 72%, from 64% to 72%. So not only is there within these environments a preference for on-premises data collection and storage and the overall infrastructure, there is a desire of people that are changing to move even more in the direction of on-premises moving forward.
Right, and I think what that 76% is really looking for in that transition is an infrastructure that scales easily, B, is cost effective at scale, because obviously if you can't afford it, it doesn't do you any good. And then the third thing is it's got to be easily managed, right? Because if you can't manage it at scale, again, you're kind of stopped in making any progress. So if you look at your circle here, I mean that whole red and orange segment over there, I think is a perfect candidate for a private cloud infrastructure that really delivers on all of those parameters. I think that's what the whole point is, the next generation infrastructure that suits the new needs of all those characteristics in the red and orange segments.
Yeah, I think, and that's an excellent point, because one of the challenges, I think, because I absolutely agree with everything you're saying. I think one of the challenges with the term private cloud is, especially when us as an analyst try to do analysis, it's hard to pin. You have to do a ton of work to get people to define, okay, what do you mean by private cloud? But at the end of the day, there are several high-level themes that resonate. This idea that organizations want greater accessibility to their data. They want flexibility and hardware choice, but increased scalability. There's also a desire for more automation, more API-type driven tasks, as well as more abstraction. Because at the end of the day, what organizations are finding out, especially with these new emerging workloads, is it's no longer this data set is tied to this app and never the two shall change their environment. Now we have data sets that we want to make available to different types of things. And because of that, the performance envelope changes, the storage type needs to evolve, and so there is this need for flexibility. What's interesting, though, is it's hard to talk about private cloud without thinking about the hybrid cloud and public cloud environments. And so when we think about that, one of the big aspects is just this, in private cloud, is this increase in investment on premises. And that, to me, that's kind of the first piece of pulling together this hybrid cloud environment. And part of it is we're seeing a dramatic increase in the investment and storage on premises. So 96% of IT organizations, this is in our research, are increasing their on-premises storage capacity. 54%, this amazed me, 54% of the people we talk to are increasing that storage capacity at a rate of more than 20% year over year. So to me, that was incredible, because some of these environments are we're getting to where a petabyte is the norm anymore, just the level of capacity. And that ties back to object storage, which is a technology that is designed for these massive capacity environments. We're seeing 53%, more than half, planning to accelerate their spending on object store, with an additional 37% saying, hey, we're going to keep spending what we're spending. So just massive growth in capacity on premises.
Yeah, the growth in the object storage side really makes sense in all of this, because it does meets all of those characteristics we've been talking about in terms of scalability, cost, affordability, and it really is the storage type of the cloud. I mean, everyone knows now that obviously Google, Amazon, Microsoft, they're built on object storage environments for their public cloud infrastructure, and there's a reason for that. It's because it does fulfill all those attributes. And I think that what's really becoming interesting, and we see more and more customers using the on-prem and the cloud in conjunction with each other. They're using them together to mutually solve a problem. So, what are you seeing in terms of that hybrid cloud? What are you seeing in terms of the customers that are doing that? What are they looking for in that hybrid cloud infrastructure?
Yeah, and just to echo your comments on object store first before we get into hybrid cloud, absolutely agree. There's organizations are finding out from an on-premises standpoint that limiting your architecture in scale in really any way is going to be a losing proposition, given how much data is growing. And I think those ideas, so that's if you think about just overall infrastructure characteristics, that's one aspect. And then you get into the hybrid cloud model, which is to your question, which is believing that the world is going to be only in the data center, or believing the world is only going to be using public cloud services, is a losing proposition. It is going to be a hybrid world, and making decisions, when you make IT decisions, you have to understand that. But one of the big challenges is figuring out, okay, what do you mean by hybrid cloud? And so, we did a research on companies that had hybrid cloud, multi-cloud environments, essentially people that were using multiple infrastructure as a service providers, as well as having their own data center. We asked them, what do you mean by hybrid cloud? And one of the things I love about this chart is just how, there's no one dominant answer. But what we see is you can think about these as things people want or they expect hybrid cloud solutions to have. And you see what comes out of this is the ideas of management and movement. Okay, we have to manage apps or infrastructure that's both on and off premises. We have to have data that can move both on and off premises. We have to have APIs that are compatible both on and off premises. This idea that the cloud is some disparate thing somewhere else and our data center's here, and the two things will live in, harmony but separate and will never touch is just becoming a ludicrous idea. There has to be commonality, because it goes back to that complexity element. It's too difficult. The context switching, the paradigm switching of going back and forth is creating too much complexity for IT, and that complexity shows up in lost time and more burdens and just slower infrastructure services.
Yeah, and we certainly see the same thing, is that customers are, as an example, storing data to an on-premises location and then creating a DR copy in the cloud, a classic use case, or they're using the cloud as overflow capacity, or perhaps you're using the cloud as analytics engine, right? You can store data on-prem, do analytics in the cloud, but you have to have those two environments work together. I think that's really the key point here, is that we used to see these two environments as being distinct. They had different workloads. They spoke different languages. They had different management platforms. But now we're really seeing the two come together to make them operate a lot more as one, which I think solves a whole bunch of these problems that you're talking about here.
Yeah, what that reminds me of is, I think it was several decades ago, there was this idea that multitasking was a good thing. People that could go, just in general, people that could go in and I can do task A and I can do task B, and they're completely different. Keep in mind. Well, as organizations have studied that, you found out actually multitasking is bad, because there's a cost between switching back and forth and becoming aligned in doing the same thing. There's efficiencies in that, and so you take that same high level idea and bring it back to hybrid cloud operations, and you say the more commonality you can get, the better off you are, because you're able to streamline, because you're able to have that you're able to have not only streamlined in efficiency, but that reduced complexity minimizes risk as well. And so one of the things that, just kind of some more hybrid cloud stats here, which is really important, is when we ask organizations, okay, where do you expect your workloads to be in 3 years from now? 89% expect half or more of their workloads to be on premises. So this is not, okay, we have to adopt the cloud, but we also have to understand that a bulk of the things that we're managing are going to be on premises for a certain period of time, for the foreseeable future, actually. So, if you kind of read this chart, 35% say, most of it will still be on premises, and then 54% expect a 50-50 split, and then only 8% saying, oh yeah, most of the stuff will be on the cloud. What's really interesting about this is people tend to be more optimistic in their ability to do things when you talk about 3 years out. So it wouldn't surprise me if in reality these numbers are even shifted more on premises. But the point of it is, so despite the reality, the ideal is you want to be able to manage everything you're doing on, you want to be able to get your apps into a cloud-enabled world. And so the more commonality you have, the better off you are, because these new emerging applications, you're not going to architect them within a data center-only mindset, right? They're going to be built in a hybrid cloud mindset.
Right. I mean, a very simple way to look at this is just, we're creating data at twice the rate we're creating bandwidth to move that data around. So ultimately, there's going to be a limitation, and where that data is going to reside is probably going to be pretty close to where it was created in many, many cases. And I think that gets back to an earlier point we were making about converging analytics and storage, because the other thing is that, where that data resides is probably where a bunch of that analytics is going to go on. And this is going to be in a variety of locations. You mentioned IoT as one of the leading growth areas. That collecting a massive amount of data in very remote locations, and that storage and analytics is probably going to end up happening where that data is being collected. And we're seeing that over and over again. One of the key attributes of what we do is the geo-distributed nature of our storage, the fact that the storage can reside anywhere and yet be managed as a single cluster. And this idea of that data residing where it's created really kind of speaks to this whole idea. But to make this all work together, the only way this really makes sense long-term in terms of all these things being easy to manage is the cloud and on-prem environments have to be really managed as one. I mean, they have to have a lot of commonality that simplifies that management workload.
Oh yeah, you're absolutely right. And the idea, it's so much of the traditional infrastructure model was built around storing and protecting data where it lives, and regardless of what is happening in the networking world, that we're at a disparity in technology. The amount of if you look at growth in processing, growth in storage capacities versus growth in the cost-effective movement of data. It's staggering, the difference, and most of it is a physics problem that's not going to change anytime soon. But to your point on hybrid cloud, absolutely agree, because you look at from a management standpoint, you want that commonality, but at a high level, what the idea is what we're seeing is it's not about, if you think about long-term trajectory and goals, it's not about taking what you do now and moving it or taking traditional IT processes and moving those to the cloud. There is some ideas of commonality of management, which is helpful when you do that. But when you think about the actual experience, what organizations want to do is they want to keep the management commonality the same, but replicate that cloud experience and bring that back on premises. And so when we ask organizations, what is the most important objective of your hybrid cloud strategy, you see things that come in that are talking about how can we take aspects of the cloud and bring it back on premises, such as, okay, well, first off, we need the same ability to provision IT that we get from the cloud. We need to speed things up. We need scale. We need cost-effective scale. We need to figure out how to accelerate innovation. How do we expedite things? And to me, that also ties into scale as well. Focus on less infrastructure management, more on business initiative. That's simplification. We can't have people going around managing the individual widgets anymore. No one has time for that. We have to focus on bigger business initiatives, and that requires simpler infrastructure. And then you see some of the other things around automation and focusing on the business rather than the technology.
Right, exactly, and that's what the objective of every IT manager ultimately is how do I help my company solve real business problems? Because obviously that's where the value is created. I don't create value by solving technical problems. I create value by addressing business problems using that technology, and I think that's where the hybrid cloud gets really interesting. Is now you have the ability to use not only your on-prem infrastructure, but another really well built out infrastructure, the cloud, to do that, right? The more options you have, the more ways you have of solving a problem, the better chance you're going to have of finding the optimal solution. So in terms of looking at that hybrid cloud, what are you seeing as being kind of the top objective of what customers are looking for when they go do that?
Yeah, and so before I answer that, I want to make a comment on what you said earlier, which is just to reinforce the point that when I talk to CIOs out there, every single one of them that is in a digital business or that is looking at this digital transformation narrative is trying to figure out how to free up IT resources to focus on business goals. And if anyone in the audience is sitting there thinking that their job in 5 years is going to be creating LUNs and provisioning them, and that's going to be 80% of their workload, then that's just not the way the world's going. The world is going to where IT expertise is going to be needed to figure out how to use data to enable the business, and then tying it back to tactically. So what you need to do that is you have to free up and greatly simplify this hybrid cloud management. And so when we ask people that are doing this for a living, that it's their day job, what do you want to solve this problem? Their answer is we need commonality. And so you see this bulk, 78% chose some form of commonality in our options, which is we need some common infrastructure compatibility. We need the ability to, when we think about the way infrastructure works, when we think about how we interact with it, it needs to be common. We can't have size limitations or anything moving us back and forth. We need a common application API and development. We need the way that we talk to the storage or the way we talk to the infrastructure needs to be the same, because we can't write everything to one interface and then have to be, okay, we're going to use it to the cloud. Let's just go redesign the app. And then same thing with common management interface. We can't have, that not only is it the context switching cost, but there's a paradigm cost. Much of the security risk that we see when it comes to leveraging, public cloud or really anything out there often is not a result of the lack of capability. It's a result of the lack of understanding in the user of the nuances and the difference of the interface. And so commonality of management is not just a nice to have, it's essential to risk reduction in addition to all the management benefits. And so this to me is when I think about what's truly important for hybrid cloud, it's about that delivering that commonality.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. So I think that this really gets at the whole point of what we're all about at Cloudian is driving towards that exact same thing. So maybe if I could, do you have any further closing thoughts on this, or do you mind if I charge on to the next slide here?
Go ahead, John. All you.
Okay, I'm all chomping at the bit now after that warm up. Because at Cloudian, that's really what we're all about. Is we're all about providing a common environment between the on-prem cloud and the public cloud, and really the greatest the most recent example of that is the Cloudian Hyperstore Extreme Series. Joshua, can you advance me on to the next slide here?
Sure, perfect. You bet. How's that look?
Perfect, thank you. And what's really interesting about this is this just follows on perfectly to what we were just talking about. Is this is S3 compatible storage, so it's the same storage type as you would find in the cloud, both in the way it communicates and also in the way you manage it. And it has so much commonality with what happens in the cloud because of the ease of scalability. Not only does it scale big, scales to an exabyte, but it also scales in a very cloud-like way. It scales in a modular fashion. So you're only buying what you need today, but when you need to expand tomorrow, it's something you can go do very quickly and easily, non-disruptively. So as you add capacity, you're not changing anything in the underlying infrastructure. And then it's cost effective. Again, if you can't afford it, it doesn't do you any good. And this is about 80% cost savings versus typical storage as a service. So it is, it's very cloud-like in its cost structure, very cloud-like in its management structure. So you can really think of it as being, an ideal kind of environment for the private cloud. Josh, if you could advance me to the next one there.
Sure.
For some reason, it's not doing that for me. Thank you. And really, where Cloudian fits in this environment, go back one. Where Cloudian fits in this environment, if you look at the storage landscape, you have your the SAN and NAS players, and they're very well established and great at what they do in terms of managing block and file data. Cloudian is really a player in what we consider to be the capacity data space, and that's really this private cloud kind of infrastructure where you're dealing with a lot of data it's frequently accessed, but is not necessarily the performance database. So it's not being run by a database. It's not for online transaction processing services. Big data, right, where you're storing data that comes in from an IoT environment and then doing analysis on it. Media, consolidating media from within a workflow, such as going from an ingest environment to an editing suite to a distribution environment. This would be a common environment for all of those workflows to access a single pool of data. That's a classic media use case here. NAS offload, 60% of NAS data has not been accessed in the last year. That's a perfect place you could put that data where it can remain accessible and yet still be very cost-effective and scalable. Video surveillance, bioinformatics, these are just great examples of where that capacity data workflow really makes sense. And just to close out on a few specifics of what are the commonalities between this private cloud environment and the public cloud environment. If you look at the characteristics of this private cloud, they're very, very similar to what you'd have in a public cloud. It is a multi-tenancy environment. It is geo-distributed. It can be across multiple data centers and yet still exist in a single namespace. So you get the advantage of the scale, both in capacity and in dimension, geographically, yet you still keep it all within a single namespace. And then, of course, it's a scale-out architecture because of the way it grows. It's completely modular. It's designed from the beginning to be scale out, just as the infrastructure in the public cloud would be. And of course, it's public cloud compatible. It speaks the same language, the S3 API, so it talks directly to AWS, Google GCP, Microsoft Azure, and you can manage these two environments within a single namespace. You can see actually the data in the cloud and on-prem on a single screen and manage it and search it. That's really key. You can search it within a single command. So a single query would give you access to data, whether it exists on-prem or in the cloud. And then last, of course, and just as significantly, it is built on the industry's most efficient storage platform. None of this would make any sense if it wasn't easy to buy, easy to install, and cost-effective. And in fact, that's what we're really proud of our work with Seagate, is enabling this enormously cost-effective platform with 1.5 petabytes of capacity in just 4 U of space that really delivers economics that are unprecedented in enterprise with density that is phenomenal. Right, we're packing 3 petabytes into 8 U, whereas if you look at traditional storage infrastructures, it's going to take a lot more space and a lot more power to do that. So this is where this new breed of storage, this new class of storage really changes the game and redefines how people are thinking about private cloud and shows the people the utility of a private cloud environment and how you can jointly manage it to create a hybrid cloud. So it's a very, very exciting time for storage technology. And with that, I will turn it back over to Joshua. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah. Hey, John. Well, before you turn it over to Joshua, this is Scott. I just wanted to comment on this because just to echo some of the things you're saying. There are a few things that have really impressed me about this solution. One is just that cost-effective scale because it ties in to just the way infrastructure needs to transform. The old ways are just too costly for the data sets we have now. But I love the commonality, and something else that you hit on that is so pertinent I didn't have in my research or my slides, but I see in my research all the time, is that ability to search everywhere. The idea of data access and much of the activities, especially within unstructured data, is just, those search or those, what was traditionally in a file system like metadata activities. And the ability to do that is incredibly valuable when you're looking at an environment that large. So just wanted to echo that. Just really impressive stuff that you guys are doing at Cloudian with Seagate.
Yeah, and again, that metadata thing is that's one of the underlying capabilities of object storage. It's unique to the storage type is that both the quantity and the ability to search that metadata using industry standard tools such as Elasticsearch and visualize it using Kibana. So it's got a lot of functionality, and again, very cloud-like in the way you use it. So the common tools, the common access, and the common capabilities. So really fulfills the hybrid cloud mission.
Absolutely.
All right, Joshua?
Great. I'm jumping back in here, but great discussion, John, Scott. What I did want to do, we brought up Seagate a little bit, and I want to bring in Rags before we dive into Q&A. I know that, Rags, you've been meeting with a number of Seagate's customers in this space, and just love for you to maybe highlight some of the pain points they've shared with you, because we've done a few of these sessions, and you've brought that up in the past.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Joshua. Great discussion, Scott and John. Great partnership for us to bring together our 40 years of data management, storage excellence, and combine that with a Cloudian software. And be able to deliver a solution that's all about creating value to our customers there. Joshua, you asked me about what are some of the common problems. I mean, I'll give anecdotally while we discuss at length broader specs from Scott. People talk about a lot more about why they went to public cloud and why they need to add to it a private cloud. It's not either or. Scott brought out this point as well. It's in a hybrid cloud world. They want to have a certain aspects of this data with public cloud, but they also want some convenience and control, and some aspects of this require them to build this one out. And as they look outside for what is the right approach to do it, they very quickly find they cannot stand up a system with piecemeal. It requires a level of excellence, as well as how are they going to deliver the kind of terabytes per square feet of density that they are looking for to reduce their floor and cooling costs. But if you ask anyone, you can have a very good total cost of ownership model, but it ultimately comes down to two things that overly sway the total cost of ownership. The first one is the floor cost. The second one is the power and cooling cost, right? So having that kind of high density solutions, being able to deliver 1.5 petabytes in 4U, and with the Cloudian software, being able to scale that to hexabytes, if you will, that delivers a significant amount of value and ease for them to stand up a private cloud quickly and get faster time to value in here. And also one thing we're saying is the 16 terabyte drive that goes into this 4U100 that we have as part of the solution. This is now the highest capacity drive, our XO 16 terabyte drive in the world there. So we are very proud of that one. And it's all about having that density and being able to pack them all and being able to deliver the value is all about how do I make it the cloud-like economics when you bring that on-prem and build out your own private cloud there.
Yeah, that's great. And I think you're dovetailing right into this Q&A section, Rags. I think we had a question from somebody who wanted to know, we talked a little bit about management and movement, right? That's the high-level goal. And we have people wanting to know what's the Seagate offering beyond drives? And maybe that's a question for you with John to kind of tag team a little bit.
Yeah, let me start to that, and then John can add from a partnership perspective. First of all, you all know us from the great variety of the hard drives that we do produce. But I always say to people, we are a data management company. It's about solving all your data management needs. So we have the full spectrum from the drives to be able to deliver high-density enclosures. And with the high-density enclosures, the solution that we are partnering with Cloudian actually has the compute integrated within it as well, which further reduces the rack space. So we have everything all the way from our high capacity drives, and with our advanced technologies coming out of this, things that we have announced last year with our new recording technology called Hammer, and faster performance from a drive called Mach 2, with higher density enclosures. Now high density enclosures with the compute integrated to deliver easier, removing all your wiring problems, as well as reducing your space. And making this platform widely working across the software ecosystem. Now, this Cloudian integration is a classic example of how can I just make this work so well together and help you scale at exabyte level. John, would you like to add to that?
Yeah. I mean, just to build on that point, I see the amazement in their eyes because we've done several things. One is an 80% increase in density over our previous solution. So, that automatically saves the most precious asset in the data center, which is space. You just can't get any more of that. Second thing is that people are always amazed to learn that this is something that's going to pay dividends long term because the cost of your system actually comes down over time. One thing we're doing with Seagate that's really exciting is this fast integration where we're able to bring together a complete solution, Seagate chassis plus Seagate storage products in one integrated box that we can get to market more quickly because Seagate has designed them all to work together. What that means for the customer is faster technology to the newer, faster access to the newer technology that will help to bring costs down. So as you add capacity to this environment, it actually gets less expensive over time, or as opposed to traditional enterprise storage, where it often gets more expensive over time. So it becomes less expensive, faster access to new technologies, and easier to manage within the space you have. So it's a complete win-win-win.
That's great. I did want to just throw out there real quick. We had a question that came in. Scott touched upon this a little bit, but somebody just wanted to know in general, what is the mix of public cloud and private cloud for an organization? I know Scott, showed the 20%, yearly increase. What would you say? It's kind of a snapshot of current landscape.
So sure, this is Scott. I can kind of talk to it. So we definitely see. I'm trying to remember some of the stats off the top of my head. But I want to say we do a regular study of overall IT environments and organizations. I want to say now granted, these are predominantly people that already have their own data centers. But I want to say somewhere around 60% were using infrastructure as a service already, and in addition to having their own data center. And I want to say it's not 60. I want to say it's like 58%. Which is always a fun part of trying to remember stats, live. But what's really interesting is of those 60%, something like 78% or 76% are using more than one cloud provider. So we're seeing just a huge. Not only is there a predominant use of public cloud resources, but also a preference to use more than one. Now, in terms of overall share, predominantly we measure that in terms of apps, and it tends to be predominantly on premises, and we see data flowing that same way as well. But I don't have a specific share. Predominantly, if you started on premises, you tended to be, which is the bulk of organizations, you tend to have half, if not significantly more, on premises.
One stat I think is really interesting there is that the growth in private cloud today slightly exceeds the growth in public cloud. I mean, they're both growing. They're both doing great. Make no mistake. But the growth in private cloud actually slightly exceeds it, which means that IT managers are now balancing their decision making. They're saying we need growth in both areas.
Absolutely, absolutely agree on that.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. John, a follow-up from the Cloudian slides that were presented. Somebody wanted to know, in general, why object storage over any other option that's out there?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question because object storage it's a technology that's been around for a while, and why now? What's causing this surge of growth today? And really, it comes down to that commonality. It provides you a common management landscape with the public cloud because it's managed in a similar way because of the the modular growth and the cost structure. But I think another really key part of this that we didn't really talk about yet is the language. The public cloud storage environment is today pretty much built on the S3 API. That's the most common language for talking to public cloud today. And S3 API is the only API, it's the only storage language that was really designed after the birth of the internet. If you look at file storage and block storage, both of those were created before the internet really came into existence. S3 API was entirely designed with the internet in mind, and consequently is very good for large-scale data management of data at a distance, and management of data across multiple sites. So as just one simple example is the use of multi-part upload, which is a part of the S3 API that allows you to transfer large files over a distance reliably. So whether your data is on-prem or in the cloud, the ability to move these large data sets and be robust in the way you do it to make sure that you can move it quickly and easily is a very key aspect of what's in the S3 API that you wouldn't find in file or block storage. So it's the whole package. It's the management infrastructure itself and the commonality. It's the way you talk to it, and ultimately the cost structure.
Got it. Yeah, I was going to get an S3 plug in here. You covered kind of what it is, and I think we had some questions about what applications support the S3 API.
I think
we're kind of running short on time, but
yeah, exactly. I'll just briefly hit on. Probably the most common use case today is backup and archive. All of the backup and archive players today support the S3 API, but also in media and entertainment, in bioinformatics, and data management. Splunk supports the S3 API. There's a huge number of use cases today that are using this, and they work just as well on-prem as they do in the cloud. So they're completely interchangeable.
Got it. And John, just while we still have you, before I run into the final slides here, a lot of storage makers say that they're scalable, right? We hear that term thrown around. How's the Cloudian solution different?
Well, scale, yeah, exactly. Every storage generation has improved in scale over the one before, and I think what's different about object storage is the lack of limits. Every other storage infrastructure ultimately has limits, and in the case of file storage, it's really in the small number of petabytes before things start getting too hard to manage. Really, object storage was designed to scale because it's a completely flat namespace. There is no hierarchy. There are no trees involved. So the theoretical limit is essentially infinite, and we designed the infrastructure from day one to be scalable. It's really the genesis of our company is out of scalable computing, and that's what we're all about, is making sure you can continue to manage it easily as you grow.
Got it. And I know we're in the interest of time. I'm going to dive in here, John, Scott, Rags. Great discussion, and I want to thank you guys for offering us a glimpse of the broader view of how organizations are handling these challenges. And this brings us to our final slide, what I like to call the lightning round. John, Scott, Rags, maybe jump in here and get some final thoughts as we close things up.
Yeah, let me quickly say this is an exciting time with the amount of data growth. Like we predicted with the IDC report, 175 zettabytes of data that we put out recently. All this data need to be put to use. We are looking for the right solution. We are happy to be helped.
Yeah, and from the Cloudian perspective, it's all about building the private cloud and building this cloud-like infrastructure in your data center that positions you well for the next generation of data growth.
Yeah, and I just, this is Scott. My final thought is, we're in a new era of IT, and we have different, it's built on different assumptions, different beliefs, and one of those is data is insanely more valuable. It drives the business, and IT should be doing everything it can possible to be built on an infrastructure that is incredibly scalable and incredibly cost-effective, and something that enables the cloud or enables hybrid cloud rather than resist it. And when I think about the things that Cloudian and Seagate are doing, it aligns with all three of those things.
Great summary. I appreciate it. John Scott Ragg.